My name is Brenda Pollock, and I'm on the board of the Friends of the Walpole Library. And before I go further, I just want to tell you that this session is being recorded so that you are aware of that. And the only thing that only people whom the audience will see are the people who are speaking up here. So I just wanted, I know many of you, if not all of you, are familiar with Gary Hylander. And I first want to say welcome back.
Well, I accept that.
It is so good to have you here.
And welcome back to you. About 2 years?
Yeah.
It's been a long time.
Been a long time. So we're excited to welcome you back. And this is the beginning, the first of a three-part series of Reconstruction America, Confederates, Freedmen, and Congress. And so don't miss the next two programs, which are December 15th and January 11th. Some people have already said, how can I sign up? And as you saw the sign up for this, you will see the sign up for the other programs as well. So stay tuned. Just to say a little bit about Gary that you might already know, Gary earned his PhD in history from Boston College. He's been an advanced placement history teacher, I learned at Stoughton High School a while ago, and has recently retired from the faculty at Framingham State University and Stonehill College, as well as a public affairs commentator on local and cable news and radio. Dr. Hylander is currently a frequent lecturer at library forums, historical societies, senior living centers, and civic and professional organizations. He knows American history inside and out. Please join us also. I just want to do a little, little encouragement to join us for other programs. And there will be a program on December 6th. The speaker will be Tamara Green, and she is from the Walpole Media TV, and she's going to be talking about all aspects of media TV programming. So check out the description on the Friends website, also on Facebook, as well as in the library.
I think it said just Zoom on that.
On Tamara Green.
I think so.
It could be. So in that case, but we have to register for a Zoom as well. So just stay in touch so that you'll know what's happening, okay? And on that note,
thank you.
Welcome, Gary.
Thank you. And it's good to be back. It's good to be back, and thank all of you for such a warm reception. And tonight, this is the first time we've gone live in person, and on cable. So this is the first, and we're going to have to review it together and see how it works out and what we can do to improve it or make sure things don't change. So, this is a preview of coming attractions. And what we've done here is I've limited to 3. Should I look at the camera more? I've limited to 3 presentations so that we can keep it under control and see how this format works. Because unless things change abruptly, we're not going to be able to fill the room with 100 and 125 people, for a while. So again, welcome home, welcome back. And we're doing Reconstruction America. But before I get to Reconstruction America, and I would be remiss without mentioning this, to talk a little bit about Thanksgiving and to share with you the fact that the way we celebrate Thanksgiving, a week from today, a week from tomorrow, the way we celebrate Thanksgiving is inauthentic. If you have turkey on your table, it's inauthentic. There was no turkey on their table. What was? Seal meat, S-E-A-L, seal meat, raccoon, beaver tail, an eagle that maybe had been shot down by Miles Standish. There's no eggnog, and there certainly is no chablis. There might be dandelion wine, which is bitter and foul tasting, but the way we celebrate is not the way they celebrate. In fact, they did not even call it a Thanksgiving. A Thanksgiving was about fasting. what they celebrated, and this was a tradition brought from England, is a Thanksgiving holiday in which they thanked the Lord for rain. They thanked the Lord that whatever plague had been besetting them had disappeared. Thank you, Lord. Or that the Indians had, the natives, the naturals, as they called them, had not attacked. So there's no plum pudding, there's no eggnog, and as I said, there's no Chablis, and there's no Canadian Club and ginger ale. So you and then I'll move along. There are no forks. You had a knife and one had a spoon, and the men carried the knives and spoons inside their hats, and the women carried their eating utensils inside their aprons. And there were no napkins. You simply walked around and you took your spoon and you dove it into some squash. And then the next person, and then the next person, and the next person in a trencher. Now do that to be authentic. And take your knife and spoon out some rabbit meat, spoon out some seal, and offer it to your significant others. Darling, this is magnificent. Who made this? Well, you know who made this. I did. And thank you for the indirect compliment. So it's not the way we celebrate at all. And one doesn't even know what month it was. It may have been in September. It may have been in October. It was in November, because Abraham Lincoln designated the last Thursday in November as Thanksgiving. And when Franklin Roosevelt tried to move Thanksgiving to the third Thursday in November to generate more holiday shopping for the Depression, he just got mail and mail and mail. You cannot fiddle with Thanksgiving. We've done enough experimentation with all these New Deal measures, but don't move Thanksgiving. So that's my opening. And keep that in mind. And at the end, if you want to be remembered forever, see, there were no napkins. So if your grandchildren are there, or you're there, and your children are there, if you want to make a real impression, when you ask for a napkin, they may say, well, we don't have any. Wouldn't that be great? If your grandchildren are there, watch this. That's how you'll wipe your mouth. So take any of those bits and pieces and work with them. So tonight, this is the first time I've done this topic. So for me, as this whole format, it's very much experimental and fun to change gears from time to time. And to talk about Reconstruction. And I'm going to end with this. I'll come back to it. That people have called Lyndon Johnson's Great Society, the second Reconstruction. And I'll talk a little bit about that in our third session. A little about Abraham Lincoln. He's on the $5 bill. How can you go wrong? And just to remind you that if you want to be on the currency, you need to be dead. If you want to be on a postage stamp, you need to be dead. So don't wish that anytime soon. Abraham Lincoln, and this is really an opening for questions. If you'd like to ask me questions, I keep looking this way, and I know that I'm over here as well. Can you spot me over here?
Yeah, I can see you. Yeah.
Enough. You can see me enough. You know what I'm wearing. You got the right color. Okay, good. It's always good to present well. Abraham Lincoln, elected in 1860, who will deal with slavery and make the first steps to think about Reconstruction. He didn't use the word restoration. He used the word Reconstruction. And there's a difference between the two words. I'll get to that a little bit later. If not tonight, I was going to say tomorrow morning. Are you going to with me that long? If not tonight, we'll do it the next time we meet. Lincoln elected in 1860, and his position on slavery was mixed as far as he was concerned, that his position on slavery, which is all part of the Reconstruction question as well, Freedmen, Congress, and so forth, was that his position in 1860 is we need to contain slavery, contain it to the 15 slave states, and do not allow it to expand into the territories. And that over time, slavery will disappear. It'll vanish. It'll vanish for two reasons. One is that Southern slaveholders will begin to realize, he hoped anyway, that slavery was immoral. It violated one's whole position on freedom. And also that slaveholders will come to realize that slave labor is not efficient. You get more from a man, more from a woman, if they're working freely on their own free will. It's inefficient, it's not economical, and it's wrong morally. And Lincoln was asked, well, when do you think this might take place? When will this healthy transition take place? And he said, I don't know. Maybe at the turn of the century, 1903, 1905. He didn't know. He just said, if we contain it, over time, it will expire. Breckinridge, who was his main opponent, maintained that slavery, or that slaves are property. And as property, you may take slaves into any territory, into any state that you wanted. Now that begged the question, didn't it? Can you bring slavery back into New York, into Massachusetts? And no one wanted to touch that yet, but it's property. And we can bring it into the new territories as property. You folks in the North, you bring cattle, you bring wagons, you bring horses, you bring tools. For us, slaves are property, they're tools. It's the way we make money. So this was an ongoing debate, even before the election. Lincoln is elected by a majority, and the majority comes from the northern states. Massachusetts voted Lincoln. I think they voted him, 62 to 63%. This is a question that's going to bedevil Reconstruction. In 1863, Lincoln was beginning to think about Reconstruction. He called it Reconstruction. And in 1863, Lincoln issued, and we all learned this in school, Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation. And as Lincoln said, and I was there, I was at the table when he signed it. Lincoln said to his cabinet members, all of whom were invited to attend the signing, he said, if I am remembered for anything, it will be for the Emancipation Proclamation. And he was nervous, and he signed it on January 1st, 1863, New Year's Day. Freedom, New Year, a new year for everyone. And it was the custom back then, it certainly isn't the custom today, that on New Year's Day, that the president would stand on the steps of the executive mansion. It wasn't called the White House yet. Would stand on the steps of the executive mansion, and a long line would appear to greet him and to wish him a Happy New Year. And he would stand there and shake your hand, and he would wish you a Happy New Year. That was a tradition. What a great tradition. We don't expect that today, do we? And Lincoln, after a day of standing on the Capitol steps, Happy New Year. Happy New Year to you, Mr. President. That they cut the line because it's getting time for me to issue the Emancipation Proclamation, for which I will be remembered for this day and all days. And he called his cabinet to be there, to witness it. And this must have been dramatic. He opened the left-hand drawer and he took out the Emancipation Proclamation. And one can read it. And there are no words. Lincoln used great words at Gettysburg and in that first and second inaugural. It's a very standard statement. It reads like a lawyer's brief, where slavery will be ended and where it will not be ended. And it was not ended in the border states, by the way, in Maryland and Missouri. He didn't want them to bolt the Union. In Delaware, he didn't want them to bolt the Union. So it's very carefully drawn, like a lawyer's brief. And I urge you to read it. And you'll say, where are the great words from the Gettysburg Address or the second inaugural? They're not there. It is. It's a boring legal brief outlining where it applies and where it does not. What he does say is that where it applies, these folks are henceforth forever free. But that's not my point. I always get off point. And so when he brings it out of the desk drawer and he goes to pick up his pen, he fumbles it. And these are the pens, like when you were in grammar school, you dip in the inkwell, and you wrote on your hand or you wrote on the person's neck in front of you, which I did whenever I had a chance. That got me in trouble from time to time. I didn't mind. I liked getting in trouble. You became a hero from time to time for doing that, particularly to the young girls who sat in front of you when they kept changing desks. So the pen fumbles out of his fingers. He picks it up again. It fumbles out of his fingers again. His hand is swollen after hours and hours of shaking hands. So he sends one of the White House servants down to the ice room. He brings up ice, and the numbness and the swelling is reduced, and he picks it up and he signs it with his full name, Abraham Lincoln. He typically signed documents A. Lincoln. For some reason, I don't know why, for some reason, he disliked the name Abraham. So it was A. Lincoln, A. Lincoln. In this case, it's Abraham Lincoln. I want to be remembered for this. And I know I will be remembered for all time, for the Confederate leaders, for Jefferson Davis, president of the Confederacy. What does this mean? It means we will never surrender. We will never compromise our position on slavery, on states' rights. That was a false issue, states' rights. It was slavery, slavery, slavery. So Lincoln signs it. It goes into effect where it has no bearing because the Confederacy does not recognize him as president, but it's done. It's done. It's on the books. And in 1863, Lincoln also issues, and this is his first thinking about Reconstruction. See, he's thinking about the reconstruction of the Union even before the war is won, which sometimes you're on shaky ground. Even before we've won the war, we're going to think about how we're going to end it as best we can peaceably with these 11 states that have joined the Confederacy. But Lincoln wants to get ahead of that game. And he issues in 1863 the Emancipation Proclamation. As I said, the Emancipation Proclamation. And it's clear, where it affects and where it does not affect. In Congress, the first battles over Reconstruction occurred between Lincoln and Congress. See, Lincoln believed that as president, that he alone had the executive authority to lay down the plans or the diagram for Reconstruction of the Union. He had called out the army. He had won his war or was about to win his war. And as commander-in-chief, it was his job to lay it out. He wanted to. And as he said, I want Reconstruction, however it winds up, but as long as I maintain control, I want Reconstruction to be compassionate, rapid, and without vengeance. There's been enough blood. I don't want any hangings or executions. There's been enough blood. There are enough grieving families, North and South. I want it to be compassionate, rapid, and without firing squads or hangings. There are many congressmen, one of whom was Charles Sumner from Massachusetts, and many others who did not want that. They wanted the Confederacy, those Confederate states, punished, and they had left the Union. And Lincoln maintained they never left the Union. They never did. Secession is wrong. There was no, it's coming. We've come full circle, haven't we? I still carry it in all of my suit coats and sport coats. There is no language in the Constitution that prevents, as they said, the Confederates said, there is no language in the Constitution that prevents secession, prevents us from leaving. And Lincoln, I can just see him, can't you? All 6'3" of them flipping through it and say, you're right. You're absolutely right. There is no language which prevents secession. And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why there's no language, because when the founders wrote the Constitution, and that's a great story, when they wrote the Constitution, they never thought for a moment, who would ever want to leave? You've got a great deal. Who would ever want to leave? You want to leave me? Are you kidding? You've got the best deal of your life. You would never want to leave me. You would never want to leave this union. And that's why there's no language which prevents secession, because no one would want to leave. And he said, if you look carefully, there's language here that talks about how the country would expand, grow, state by state by state. They saw it as growing and expanding across the country. Nobody ever thought of it changing and being reduced. This is not a reductionist, what I want to use, document to expand. So, and I am the president. You know, I called out the army. I'm beginning to win my war, and I am commander in chief. Now, this is Lincoln. Now, he didn't pound the table. I'll tell you what he did do. This was clever. Congress wanted to control Reconstruction. And their point was a state may, if a state leaves the Union, they develop a theory, it's state suicide. That's their phrase, not mine. State suicide. If you've left, you become a territory. You've committed state suicide. And according to the Constitution, only territories can be admitted back into the Union by Congress. Alabama, I'm not picking on Alabama, but I'm not. Maybe I am. If Alabama has left the Union, and they have, and they've said they've left, they've become a territory. And only Congress may admit territories. So therefore, we control Reconstruction. Now, Lincoln didn't buy that. And Lincoln was never looking for a fight if he could avoid one. Lincoln was clever. You know, he has a clever use of language, a clever use of documents. There's nothing here, again, I'm going to say it again. There's nothing here, you know, that talks about leaving. The only thing here is about joining. Now read it tonight. And I always have urged you, haven't I? And now you have a homework assignment. It's been 2 years. 2 years since I've given you a homework assignment. Read the Constitution. It's a wonderful document. And read the Emancipation Proclamation. It's disappointing. There's no soaring language. Lincoln wasn't looking for soaring language. This is a detail. This is a lawyer's brief. Back to Congress. Congress, we control Reconstruction because these states left the Union. They committed state suicide and they become territories, and only Congress can admit territories. And Lincoln said, okay, what's your plan? What's your option? And what came from that was a measure called the Wade-Davis Bill. Wade-Davis Bill. Wade from Ohio, Davis from Maryland. House and the Senate working together. You can read it. It's the Wade-Davis Bill. And the Wade-Davis Bill read that when 50% of a state, you know, agreed that what we made a mistake, and we are looking, 50% of the voters agreed that we made a mistake and we wish to rejoin the Union without slavery, we will consider it. Lincoln never went that far. He had said early on when 10% of the voters from the 1860 voting list had agreed to write a new state constitution without slavery, there will all be pardoned, except senior officers of the Confederacy and senior officers of the military. And I'll deal with them later on. He wasn't looking to pick a fight. He hoped with, it's called the 10% plan. He knew he couldn't get 10%, but he was hoping that if he showed how moderate he was, 10%, I'm using Alabama, 10% of the voters of Alabama from the voting list who had voted in 1860, when they agree to write a new state constitution, which I need to approve, and which excludes leaders of the Confederacy, and they accept the end of slavery, they're in. Tennessee said, we're in. Arkansas said, we're in. And Lincoln said, you're in. You're back home. And I'm not going to ask where you've been, who you were with. That's great, isn't it? You left the Union? No, you never did. You know you never left the Union. What a deal you've got here. You never left the Union. We had a fight. You walked out. You stamped your feet. You walked out. But I left the door open. And I left a meal for you in the refrigerator. Come on home. Come on home. Everything's fine here. You never left the Union. You never left me. Who would ever want to leave me? Maybe I would, but who would ever want to leave me? You got a good deal here. And this is Lincoln in Congress looking to pick a fight. 50%. You couldn't get 10%. Lincoln knew that. 50%. And it will be Congress who will vote whether or not former leaders of the Confederacy will be readmitted and as politicians and to be able to vote and run for office. And what Lincoln did, rather than pick a fight, we'll deal with this later. He took the Wade Davis bill with 50%, and when's the last time you heard this phrase? He pocket vetoed it, which means that if he doesn't sign it within 10 days, it never happened. Congress has to go back and rewrite it and reconsider it. I'm not going to pick a fight with you. And he added to that, you can choose. Alabama, you can choose the Wade Davis bill with 50%, or you can choose my bill with 10%. You make the call. I'm not picking a fight. We'll deal with this later. I'm just offering a very modest alternative. That drove Messrs. Wade and Davis crazy, and others who wanted Reconstruction to be hard, punished, and some leaders, of the Confederacy executed. So we're setting up a battle between the executive branch and the legislative branch over Reconstruction. They battle all the time, don't they? This was a huge battle, and Lincoln knew it. How are we going to put the Union back together again? How are we going to be the United States of America as opposed to the disunited States of America? You know that if Lincoln had not been successful and we had the Confederacy in the heartland of the country, that you would need a passport to get to Disney. I mean, you would need a passport to travel to Florida. You would need to convert your dollar, into Confederate money. It didn't happen that way. Lincoln wanted Reconstruction to be soft, compassionate, and non-retributive. And one way to get a handle on that, and this is another homework assignment, read Lincoln's second inaugural. It's short. It's maybe 700 words. You can read it at a red light. Read his second inaugural. And in it, it is so clear, with malice toward none, to bind up the nation's wounds, to care for him who has suffered the burden of service. And read it. It's compassionate. It's not argumentative. And many folks who attended that second inaugural, one of whom was John Wilkes Booth, were expecting Lincoln to be harsh, to be hard. And he also talked about perhaps giving the vote to certain intelligent Blacks. Now, he never defined intelligent, but he was open to the consideration of giving black men, the right to vote. And this is Lincoln. And most people expected he would be hard, he would be harsh, talked about hangings and executions. That's not Lincoln. Again, to repeat myself, there's been enough blood. There's been enough grieving families, North and South. And some of you I know, have family members who served in the Northern Army or served in the Confederacy. I know that. I do. Only through marriage, who served in the Confederacy. Was related to Jefferson Davis, president of the Confederacy. I hear about that all the time. Before things happened, which are not part of my discussion, when I went down to Kentucky, which never left the Union, half of the men of Kentucky joined the Confederate Army, the southern half, that at a party, I guess it was, what's the party you have? The guy party before you get married? Pardon me? Something like that, whatever. And my gift, they were watching how I responded to this gift. I'm from Illinois, the land of Lincoln. And they knew that I was from the land of Lincoln. And you're going to marry? one of the relatives of Jefferson Davis of the Confederacy? Girl, what are you thinking about? He's from Illinois, the land of Lincoln. You're related to Jefferson Davis of Kentucky. Now, Jefferson Davis was born in Kentucky. What are you thinking about, girl? So my gift, after I showed these folks that I could handle my bourbon, and it was Jack Daniels, bourbon neat. No ice, no water, no ginger. Bourbon neat. And you sip it gently. You chew on it, don't you? You chew on bourbon. So the gifts came. And here was the gift that everyone was waiting for me to unwrap and ooh and ah over, which is what I did. So I opened the package. I'll open it up and drew out the gift. And the gift I unfolded. It was the Confederate flag. And it had 12 stars in it, assuming that both Missouri and Kentucky would eventually leave the Union. So, boy, can I act? I said, this is the finest gift I have ever received. This is better than Christmas. And really. So that was my introduction, that even though I was from the land of Lincoln, that I could accept this gift. You should have been there. You would have been proud of me. What an actor you are. So Lincoln, the 10% plan, and Congress, the Wade Davis bill, pocket veto, and Lincoln, you can choose either Wade Davis or you can choose my bill. But we want you back in the Union. You cannot leave. You never left. Now, this is interesting, and it serves their purpose. Arkansas, Tennessee, and Louisiana accepted Lincoln's proposal. And they said, you're right. You're right, Mr. Lincoln. We never left the Union. Better deal. We never left the Union. And the Congress, you did. You said you did. And we're going to hold you to it. And that sets the stage for the battle for Reconstruction. Who controls Reconstruction? The legislature? And these states committed state suicide, and they're out of the Union, and only we can admit territories. Or Lincoln, you never left. You were angry. You stomped out. We had a fight. That's okay. Couples fight. Do they? Couples fight, and they make up and they come back in and everything is fine. That's Lincoln. We had a fight and you stomped out, fine. Cool down. What's your cooling off period? Cool down. And some people have a cooling off period, for an hour? What's your cooling off period? Get back in. You never left. And here we're set the stage for the battle of Reconstruction. And for Lincoln, let me stop for a moment. A question, maybe? A story? Did you ever get stopped in a former Confederate state with a Massachusetts plate? Yes. You know what I'm talking about. And I got stopped in Tennessee with an Illinois plate. And that didn't help me out at all. The cop that pulled me over, he said I ran a yellow light. I'm not going to quarrel. There's no sense in quarreling. And I noticed in the rearview mirror, as he pulled in behind me and walked around the car, he looked at my license plate. And when they come up to the window, he didn't ask for license and registration. Not at first. He simply looked at me and he said, "Land of Lincoln, huh?" I knew it was going to cost me $50, and it did. And that's just what he said. He had the sunglasses on. Land of Lincoln, huh? I'm not going to argue with him. I didn't run a light, but you said I did. I'll pay it. In 1864, when Lincoln ran for re-election, and again, this was an effort on his part to set the stage for Reconstruction or to show that he was moderate, willing to accept differences of opinion. This shocked the nation. It certainly shocked the Republican Party. Lincoln was a Republican. and it certainly shocked the Republican Party. Lincoln selected as his vice president Andrew Johnson, not Camilla Harris. He selected Andrew Johnson. Thank you. There's another story. You can tell I can be tough. And he selected Andrew Johnson. What was especially surprising about him selecting Andrew Johnson? A couple of things. One, Andrew Johnson was from Tennessee, a slave state. Andrew Johnson, Tennessee had left the Union. And when the senators from the slave states left the Union and vacated their chairs, he was the only one who did not. And for Lincoln, Andrew Johnson has the good sense to continue to represent the slave state of Tennessee, even though he didn't get paid. He held his seat, setting an example. Even though my state left the Union, I am not leaving Tennessee. I will continue to represent the interests of Tennessee, sitting in the Senate chamber. The only one who did. Talk about lonely. So for Lincoln, it shows good sense. It shows good sense that Andrew Johnson had owned slaves at one time. He had freed them. Good sense. And he wasn't forced to. And Andrew Johnson was a self-educated man. His wife taught him how to read, taught him how to write. Lincoln was a self-educated man as well. So for Lincoln, he's self-educated, I am self-educated. He opposed slavery by freeing his slaves before I even issued the Emancipation Proclamation. And he's from a state that left the Union, and he had the courage to continue to represent the interests of Tennessee. Now, it must have taken some chutzpah, I would think, on his part. He drew criticism for this. Lincoln chose it. And Lincoln, I am not running as a Republican this time. And look at the bring it up on the on tonight. He renamed the Republican Party. He called it the National Union Party. And I am choosing someone whose state left the Union, the National Union Party, and we will win as the National Union Party. Good stuff, isn't it? Talk about conversation around the table, in the tavern, in a duel. I mean, talk about conversation. And in the election, the 1864 election, again, I'm trying to set this up for you because again, I want to make this point. Reconstruction, the issues of Reconstruction did not simply fall out of the sky. They had a history and animosity behind them. When the Democrats chose their candidate to run against Abraham Lincoln at the Emancipator, old Abe, and look at his color. He's got black blood in him. Look at his color. Look at how spindly his fingers are, his legs are. He's got black blood in him. He'd be a great basketball player. Look at his build. He's got black blood in him. Old Abraham Lincoln, Black Abe. The Democrats nominated John B. McClellan. When's the last time you heard that name? Nobody here voted for him? You can change your vote, Now, McClellan, the Democratic nominee, was a Democrat, and he had a grudge against Lincoln. He had a grudge against Lincoln because Lincoln had fired him, after he'd lost the Battle of Antietam, fired him. And McClellan always maintained that the reason Lincoln fired me is because I was defeated at the Battle of Antietam. And he also fired me because he did not want a successful Democrat opposing him for re-election, opposing him at all. Well, here I am. I am running against you in 1864. And I'm going to win because I'm running on one issue, the peace issue. When I'm elected, there will be peace across the country. And when I'm elected, the Union will be rejoined. Vote for me. Vote for a Union. I represent peace. Lincoln represents more war. And you all know that. All you grieving families. And Lincoln expected to get beaten. And Lincoln, now this is Lincoln. Again, I can't say, not that I'm from the land of Lincoln, that's why I'm always about Lincoln, but he was so cautious in what he did. Well, he wasn't cautious when he said, I did to Mary, but that's an issue. All right, that's another issue. Or I do. Got to get that verb straight. The McClellan expected to win the soldier vote and expected to win big and to rejoin the Union. And Lincoln called his cabinet together and he asked them to sign this paper. And he passed it around the table. May I read it? No. Sign it. And it's called the Blind Memorandum. You may not read it. But what the Blind Memorandum said is that I expect to be defeated in 1864, and all you guys are going to lose your jobs. And what I want you to do in that Blind Memorandum is to promise me, this is your word. And back then, a man's word was truthful. It was his promise that you will help the incoming administration have a peaceful transfer of power from a Republican presidency to a Democratic presidency. Just sign it. Don't read it. I expect to be beaten. And he wasn't. McClellan got beaten because McClellan did not get the soldier vote. And this is the first time absentee ballots are used. And the way they were used, see, during the Civil War encampments, the men from Massachusetts were over here. You know, the men from Ohio were over here. The men from Indiana were over here. You had your local campsite. Maybe your neighbor was there. So when they used these ballots, if you will, that the people who distributed the ballots, here are the men from Massachusetts, get their vote. Here are the men from Ohio, get their absentee ballot, and make sure they vote for me. Lincoln's the one. I'm the one. And it will be the soldier vote that will help put Lincoln over the top in 1864. Now, that's not the end of the story here, because he has trouble very quickly with Andrew Johnson. Andrew Johnson had a problem that Lincoln had heard about, but he didn't quite believe it. I mean, Grant had a problem, didn't he, with his drinking? And Lincoln checked that out, and it was not exactly a problem, that made it difficult for him to be a successful general. Now, let me stop for a minute. Maybe a question, maybe an observation. Go with your best Lincoln voice. You don't sound like Lincoln at all. He had a high screech voice. Go ahead, please.
January 1st of 1863.
I can't hear you.
Sorry. January 1st of 1863, he issues the proclamation. And we're not even 2 years into the war.
Correct.
There's another 2 years and
more
months. And he's actually issuing this 6 months before Gettysburg.
Good question. Good.
Just repeat the question so the people on Zoom can hear, please.
Question. That Lincoln issued the Emancipation Proclamation in January of 1863. The war still had two years and months. So why did Lincoln issue it? Thank you for the question. He issued it because he was getting desertions among white soldiers. He issued it because he needed black manpower. And he issued it because he knew that if black soldiers, black men and their families fled into Union lines, they would be henceforth and forever free. And he also issued it because I can use black manpower, put a rifle in their hands, and as Frederick Douglass at one time said, to put on that Union uniform with those shiny brass buttons. That makes me a man. And Lincoln used it for manpower and also to deny manpower to the women, the Confederate women, when they work the fields. And that's when, thank you again, that's when, see, that's a question I would ask in an essay. When by this time in 1863, there were so many losses that Confederate soldiers were deserting. Now, Lincoln had a desertion problem as well. Confederate soldiers were deserting to go back home because the women were writing to their men in the trenches that I'm afraid, I've got 10 or 15 slaves. I'm afraid that they're going to cut my throat. I'm afraid that they'll harm me and our children. I don't trust them. You have to come home. And of course, measured in that as I miss you. I hope, that I miss you. So many of these men deserted and went back home. And 12 or 13% desertion rates. The same thing happened in the Northern Army. We're not going, for the Northerns, we're not going to fight, to free the black man. We're going home. This is a war to restore the Union. Not so that I'm going to take a bullet, to free a black man. A lot of issues going on here, a lot of issues. And so the North had desertion rates about 11, 12% as well. I'm trying to think of the name of the book, On Cold Mountain. Anybody read On Cold Mountain, which deals with Confederate deserters and being hunted down by slave patrols. On Cold Mountain. It's a long read. It needs some editing, but that problem is addressed in On Cold Mountains. And now 10 years? Maybe more, I'm not sure. Have you read it? No, I thought I saw your hand waving. So good question. So Lincoln had a number of motives. Lincoln is like us. We never make a decision, based on one motive. I mean, there's usually a complex number of motives that lead to a decision. So there's Lincoln. I'm going to free the slaves. And Lincoln, again, I want to repeat this. Lincoln said, if I'm remembered for anything, it will be for this. Back to Andrew Johnson. No, not back to Andrew Johnson. Question? Yes, sir. In your best Johnson voice.
I'll do my best. So you mentioned the Emancipation Proclamation was issued in Washington, D.C. At that time, the South had very spotty internet service. And I'm wondering, how did the word get down to the slave who didn't live on the farm? He lived out in a cabin out behind the farm.
Correct.
How did they get the word and then say, oh, we're going to go north and put on a uniform?
Or we're going to run into Union lines first. Because Lincoln has said, you're not going back. They got the word because of the slave grapevine. I mean, the grapevine was there. People talked word to word to word, and they got the word. And when they heard the boom of Yankee cannon or the presence of Yankee cavalry, they fled into Union lines, never to be returned. I'm trying to think of the film.
Glory.
Was it?
Glory.
No, not Glory. It'll come to me. The Autobiography of Miss Jane Pittman. And in the first 5 minutes of that film, Union soldiers ride through the plantation and they're talking to the slave, and the word gets spread that way. And it wasn't a rumor. As I know, this isn't a rumor. Run into Union lines and you will not be returned. The problem Lincoln had also, since you opened up all of this, the problem that Lincoln's commanders had is that there was no policy as to what to do with runaways. And sometimes the runaways were returned, sometimes they were not. And it would be General Butler from Massachusetts, who, when runaways ran into his line, he kept them. And many of the generals, when a runaway families ran into their lines, the owner would approach with under a white flag, a flag of truce. I want my runaways back, Nancy, Dandridge, and their children. And he wouldn't do it. And Lincoln said, we need a policy for all Union generals. There was no policy. It was from general to general to general. Complex, many decisions, all decisions have many, many pieces to them. And you know that. Thank you for the question. Something else? Does that make sense? Lincoln, you already had your moment.
Sorry, it's just so interesting.
Go ahead.
Juneteenth.
Oh, yeah.
Emerged that the slaves.
Yeah. Juneteenth. Yeah. The word did not get to, as we would understand the word did not get to Texas until June. And Juneteenth is celebrating the freedom in Texas, if you will. The Emancipation Proclamation finally got across all of Texas. I never heard of that Juneteenth until 3 or 4 years ago. And I thought, geez, I should know this. I mean, this is something I should know. How did this get by me? I remember everything, even the name of my children. So, yeah, it finally got, down to Texas. Did you guys already know about Juneteenth? No. I had never heard about it. But now it gets, it got at the time a great deal of publicity, didn't it? Something else? Any questions from the Zoom people? I know who's in charge of that.
Oh, that's me, but nobody's, if anybody on Zoom.
We got responsibilities all over this room.
Nobody's waited yet.
Nobody's interested?
I guess not. I don't know. I don't see any snores either. So. Oh, one new message. Hang on.
It's okay. I'm not offended. I'll tell you when I was offended. I did a Zoom presentation. It was just Zoom at a library, and whomever set it up, brought in 12 people on the Zoom. So when it opened up, the first person that I saw was right in front of me on the Zoom, and he was eating a ham sandwich with his mouth open. Now I know they could hear me, and I said, "Whomever is eating that ham sandwich in front of me, I excuse you." And he got up and left. That's me. You are excused. I like doing that. Don't think you're going to sit there and eat a sandwich in front of me, while I'm rambling on about something. It's like, students, don't put your head down on the desk. Keep it up. Your parents are paying a good buck, for this. I don't get it, but they're paying get your head up. Sometimes it gets a little more nasty than that, depending if I've had my breakfast or not. I always love it when some kid has the courage to say, "Dr. Hylander, have you taken your medicine today?" And I'll say, "Yes, I've taken it twice. Watch your step." Something else? Please.
Sic semper tyrannis.
Oh, yeah.
Now, what is being said is, I don't like executive orders. When did they start, and was there an active Supreme Court at the time that weighed in on executive orders?
They tried to. Samuel Chase tried to, and he was afraid that Lincoln would arrest him. So Lincoln let it go, and Samuel Chase kept his job. I thought you were going to ask me who first issued an executive order, and it was Lincoln, not Lincoln. It was Washington, and he issued 8. And he set the precedent for the president issuing executive orders. And those are dangerous things. And they can be overturned, an executive order, by the court or by Congress. I mean, executive order is an executive order. That's what the Emancipation Proclamation was, in effect, an executive order from the desk of Abraham Lincoln. Wouldn't you like to be able to issue those from the desk of? Do you have one?
No. Is it in your pocket there? The ability to... In your pocket, you have some paper. Can you read to us what it says about executive orders?
Yes. It's very thin. Hamilton. Now, there's a man to reckon with. It's very thin. And he told Washington, this gives you the power to issue an executive order or an order from the desk of George Washington. Now, give me a moment to find it. I turn right to it. It's thin language. The first sentence of Article 2 of the Constitution. The executive power, there's your phrase. The executive power shall be vested and a president of the United States of America. The executive power. And Hamilton said right there, Mr. President Washington, the executive power, you have the right by the executive power to issue an executive order. Pretty thin language, isn't it? Very thin. And Washington went with it. I mean, Hamilton, what a mover and shaker he was. And that's why he got shot by Aaron Burr. He frankly messed with the wrong guy. Something else? Anything coming in on the...
No, just a reminder to, if somebody here has a question, to state it again.
Did they get it? I don't know.
I think they did now.
Okay. Something else? Somebody in the middle. To my right, to my left, somebody in the middle.
Difference between restoration and...
Okay, I'll do it right now. Reconstruction simply means to reconstruct the South, you know, the way it used to be. However you define the way it used to be. Restoration is about changing the social, economic, religious situation in the South. Andrew Johnson, Congress, restoration. We have to change the whole scene, the whole situation on the ground. Reconstruction, Humpty Dumpty, put the eggs together again, the egg together again. And they went back and forth on what they meant. Nobody is consistent. Nobody in this room is consistent. I hope not. And I hope that nobody in this room ever was awarded the perfect attendance policy. That means you don't have a life. Remember that? You would get the perfect attendance award. Anybody going to raise their hand? You do not have a life if you got the perfect attendance award. How about that? And if you hear that from somebody, run. Say, I do not agree to marry you, but I'll go out with you. You had perfect attendance? What are you with, dope? I didn't. And you know that. Something else before we adjourn. Now, next week, no, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, you know, we're going to get to the part where Lincoln is assassinated and Johnson becomes president. And here's the problem. Andrew Johnson, a Democrat from a seceded state, now assumed or said that he had all the power of Lincoln, all the executive power of Lincoln, and I will manage presidential reconstruction, not you in Congress, congressional reconstruction. And they said, absolutely not. You do not have the executive power of Lincoln. No, you're not Lincoln. And he said, I will manage reconstruction on my terms, and I will allow in state after state after state. And I'll close with this. I will allow in those senators and House members who have come to me, and have asked for a pardon. Lincoln wasn't around to issue all those pardons. Andrew Johnson, you want a pardon? Yes, sir. All you need to do is say you're sorry and to recognize me as the legitimate president. And Andrew Johnson loved the adulation. People in Tennessee, many of them loathed him. You're nobody from nowhere. Your wife taught you how to read and write. You're nobody from nowhere. You're a shoemaker. You know, the first thing that you did, you were a shoemaker. You're nobody from nowhere. You have no land. You have no money. And so when they came to him, the rich and the famous, asking him almost on bended knee for a pardon from him, from the desk of Andrew Johnson, I want you to say again just how much you appreciate my work here and that you approve of what I'm doing to bring these your southern states back into the Union. Would you please all say that again? And I can imagine when Andrew Johnson was pardoned with full political and economic pardon, that those folks waiting in the anteroom were asked, what'd y'all say to him? Well, this is what you want to say to him. And he will pardon you. And Johnson did. And that was one of the problems that came between the president and Congress. Because the Congress said, I'll get into this. The Congress said, only we can pardon. You can't pardon. And George said, I'm the president. I can pardon anyone. You think you can pardon yourself?
No.
Now, there's a question that bedeviled us, didn't it? You think you can pardon yourself? Of course I can. I'm the president. Anything else before we go? Let's hope we get some more good weather. And by the way, the winter is over. We had it last week. Remember that. It's already over. I'll see you all later. Thank you for your company. Do you need to say something? A toast. And that story about the flag, I can't make that up. I mean, I can see myself fold, and say, oh, what am I going to say? How do I handle this one? This is awkward. Pardon me?
You still have it?
No. When I moved, somebody swiped it on me. I have no idea. I looked for it. Somebody took it on me.
Thank you so much, Gary. We look forward to having you back.
I'll be back. Do you need to say anything?
No, just thanks for coming.
Thank you.
And thank you for being here.
Well, thank you.
And for being